Okay, hi everybody. How are you? I hope you're well. Um, I hope those of you who are in Israel have done what they have to do in the morning, because right now it is hot as it's hot as blazes here. It's really it's very very hot. So let's take a half hour and cool down with some learning, and let's get to it. We are actually finishing today. I can't believe it. We are actually finishing a Mishnah today. It's taken us weeks because every single line of it was so pregnant with meaning, so infused with possibilities that we just broke it down into its component parts. And we're finally getting to the last one, the last part of this Mishnah. It's chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot, Mishnah Dalet, the fourth Mishnah. And seemingly, when I first looked at it, I said, I mean, I know this Mishnah. I've seen it a million times before. But when I looked at it the first time, I said, there's nothing to say here. Well, let's see what it says. It says, Al Tomar, after a long discussion, don't separate yourself from the community, and don't believe in yourself until your last day, and don't judge your friend till you get to his place, and don't say something that was last week's, which shouldn't be said, or can't be said, or shouldn't be heard. Because in the end, it's going to be out. It'll end up being heard. And the last one is seemingly straightforward. Al tomar l'chshe'epaneh eshne shema lo tipaneh. Don't say I'll get around to it. Don't say I'll study when I have time. When I have time, I'll study and I'll do whatever. Because the truth of the matter is, you may not get around to it. A friend of mine once gave me a big piece of paper, and on it was a circle. And I said, "What is this?" And the guy said, "Well, this is a round to it," because you always say you want to get around to it. So here is a round to it. Seemingly self-forward. It's the seemingly the Mishnah itself is self-evident. I find it very interesting that. Zev Safrai, in his commentary on this Mishnah, or in this line, he really has to stretch to figure out, what can I say that's original here? Because everybody says, don't put it off, do it now. My grandmother, who was my father's mother, who was a real public figure and philanthropist and whatever, so her motto, and my mother, may she rest in peace, we have a... my mother, may she rest in peace, used to quote her all the time. Do it, did it, done. Something comes to you, don't put it off, do it. So that's seemingly the same thing about study. Upon further examination, I discovered that there's a lot more to say about this than just proper scheduling. And I found that really very intriguing. So yeah, it's true. We've encountered this idea that if you really want to study Torah, if you want to do anything, what you really must do is you must be consistent, and you must be persistent, and you must be incredibly jealous of your time. And it means prioritizing. I mean, all of this. I'm not saying anything new to anybody over here. This is standard. This is standard stuff. You need to set time. What I find to be incredibly fascinating is the kinds of excuses that the commentators come up with. Suggest that they've encountered that sort of they read into the words here. So I think the first one, of course, is we think we have endless time. And since we think we have endless time, and so we end up, life goes like that, time goes like that, and you say, my God, I thought I was going to do this and this, and I don't know where to. How many times have you said? How many times you said to yourself, I don't know where the time went. Now, this is true of everybody. Even those people who value their time and don't spend their time on social media, television, whatever the case might be. Also feel that they, that their time was not fully well spoken. There's a recording of a lecture that Rabbi Soloveitchik gave obviously many years ago, and in which he says, "I wish I hadn't wasted so much time." I can't imagine, how he wasted time, but so it's not a matter. So this is not a question of the Mishnah here coming to berate anybody, but to be aware of the fact that time is fleeting. So that's one explanation, but the others are really They're really interesting. I'll give you I'm going to, and not in, I usually go in chronological order here, but in this case I'm not going to. At the turn of the 18th century, the late 18th, early 19th century, Rab Chaim of Volozhin, the premier colleague, he really wasn't a disciple of the Vilna Gaon as much as what's called a Talmud Chaver, a sort of a colleague, a disciple colleague or younger colleague, if you want. In his commentary on this Mishnah, says something which I found to be absolutely incredible. Understand, Reb Chaim Volozhiner was the person who provided the first systematic and precise definition of the ideology of Torah for its own sake. Torah lishma. Now, those words, Torah for its own sake, have a long history. It goes back already to Talmudic times. But in the case of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, his understanding of the words was that, or is, if you look at his books, Nefesh HaChaim, and also his commentary on Avod Ruach HaChaim, is that you study Torah not just to be able to know what the law is and how to perform mitzvot, but knowing Torah per se is the mitzvah, and that's the highest form of spirituality according to him. And this definition became the basis of the ideology of all of the Lithuanian yeshiva tradition or Talmudic tradition. If those of you may be aware of the fact, I don't know if you pay attention, that the MGM has a lion at the beginning, right? The lion roars, so there's a frame around the lion, and the lion, and above it says Ars Gratia Artis. Ars Gratia Artis means art for the sake of art. In our case, and others have said that theoretical science has a similar advantage, just knowing theoretical physics, whatever it is. So that would be scientia gratis scientiae. So in our case, we'd say Torah gratis Torai. Torah for the sake of Torah, and that's all. So that being his sort of slogan. So you would have thought perhaps that his take on this Mishnah would be Torah for the sake of Torah. So therefore, maximize your time. Don't do anything else. I would have thought he would have come up with. I would have expected, and maybe because I know what happened later. But I might have thought that he would he'd give us explain for us or lay out an ideology which anticipates the Kollel ideology in the Haredi world, that you shouldn't do anything but study, and that making a living is of secondary import, which, as we've seen, really goes very much against what the rabbis taught and what generations upon generations of interpreters of Pirkei Avot thought. But if that's all there is to do, then everything should take second place to Torah. Al Tomar L'Cheh Pnei Yishneh. I won't set myself up. I'm not going to put off my Torah study. I'm going to give up everything and I'm going to study Torah. That's what I would have expected. And I was stunned to discover that that's not at all what he says. I'm going to read you what he says because it's just so amazing and so unexpected on his part. He says, Lo Tomar, don't say ever, Hein ani hayom meluchlach b'chata'im. I'm defiled. I'm sullied with sins. Umachshevet aven, and improper thoughts that lead into sin, or thoughts that lead into crime. Umabetza, what good is Torah study for me? Ki asopa Torah vatanef b'melot tumati hod yofya. I'll defile the Torah by coming close. The Torah is too holy for me. I'm lost. I'm a person who I'm not worthy of even opening up a book and studying. Says, and maybe this is actually appropriate because we're having Rosh Chodesh Elul next week. He says, so what will you say? First, I'll do tshuva, and first, I'll clean up my act, and I'll become purified. When I make a way for myself, and I become purified. Lilmod Torah lishma. At that point, when I'm able to reach the highest level of Torah study, then I'll do it. So he says, if you set up so many obstacles, if you have to be perfect before you start studying, then you're never going to get there. And also included is this idea that the Torah itself can, the person is not worthy of coming to study Torah. He says no. He says this is absolutely not true. Ze'eno. He says this is not correct. Ki limud shelo lishma hu mafteach gadol lavo lidei lishma. He says because by starting to study under less than perfect circumstances, before you have actually made the changes in your personality and in your moral character and so on and so forth, the best way to clean up your act, the best way to improve, the best way to transform the way you look at life is through study, and you work on you improve yourself on the job. Which is really very striking, because there must have been people who said, I can't. I mean, who am I to study Torah? The truth of the matter is, when I was a rabbi in Queens, a little synagogue, Long Island City, Queens, synagogue doesn't exist anymore. I remember once a guy walks into shul, and he says. And they wanted to, he couldn't read Hebrew. He was afraid of he didn't want an aliyah, even though we had the transliterated card. And I said, okay, so let's give him glila. Let him, after they lift up the Torah at the end of the Torah reading, so let him type the Torah and put the cover on and include him. And he said, I'm afraid to touch the Torah. I'm not worthy of touching it. This is another version of the same kind of aversion to coming close to sanctity, because often something was sacred you keep away, and yet Reb Chaim Volozhin is saying no. Al tomar lichshe'eh paneh. Don't wait until you're the perfect person and you think you're the biggest tzaddik in the world. Then you can start growing intellectually. No, it works on you. You take the first step, and the Torah, and you let the Torah. It's not just a question of intellectual activity. If anything, what the point that Reb Chaim Volozhiner makes at the beginning of his sort of ideological manifesto, the fourth part of his book Nefesh HaChaim, which is translated into, by the way, into English rather, and the best study of it, which is an interesting combination of studying an academic book, which is readable and also counts as Talmud Torah, is Torah for its own sake, or Torah Lishma, by the late Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So I recommend that. But anyways, he's saying no. The point of Torah study is not just to know theoretically, which is what I told you before. It's more than that. It's the highest form of worship. It's the highest form of encountering God. So therefore, you'll feel incompetent. You'll feel unworthy. But nevertheless, by taking the first step and immersing yourself and allowing yourself to worship God and encounter God through the study of Torah, you will actually start the process which will bring you to the heights whatever heights you were meant to achieve, or whatever to realize your full potential intellectually, spiritually, and by extension also in terms of the precision and the sensitivity of the way in which one observes mitzvot. What's striking also, So first of all, this is a dimension of the mitzvah Talmud Torah which I did not expect to find in Reb Chaim Volozhiner's book at this point. But it occurs to me that there's something, that there's an element in his statement here which is quite striking. The idea of a yeshiva, the idea of people dedicating themselves, learning Torah day and night, is a very, very, very elitist position. And yet, what he's talking about here in this one passage is the average person. The person who feels unworthy, I was busy, I did this, I did that, how can I come study Torah? And he's saying, yeah, it's true, as if to say, at least potentially, it's as if to say, yeah, it's true. Torah study is very demanding, and there's definitely a hierarchy, but it is also fundamentally democratic. It's in that regard. I mean, it's worth it in this connection, since I have it here anyways. I'll read you the first paragraph that Maimonides writes in the beginning of the 3rd chapter of the Laws of Torah Study. He says, "B'shloshak tarim nivteru Yisrael." The Jewish people as a whole were adorned with 3 crowns, or given 3 crowns. They were given different parts, different sectors of the community. Keter Torah, the crown of Torah, the Keter Kihuna, and the crown of priesthood, the Keter Malchut, and the crown of royalty. So the priesthood went to the descendants of Aaron, and the at least officially, at least under optimal circumstances, royalty went to King David and his descendants. And then the Rambam says, Keter Torah hare munach va'omed u'muchan l'chol Yisrael. But the crown of Torah is sitting there and waiting for any Jew to come and adorn himself with it. In other words, not just one crown of Torah. There's enough crowns of Torah for every single Jew, which is not the case with regard to priests and members of the royal family. Shene'amar, as it said, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moses commanded or imparted the Torah to all of us, lanu, everybody. Morasha Kilat Yaakov is the inheritance of the entire community of Jacob. Kol mishi yirtzeh yavo v'tol. Anyone who wants should come and grab. So it's almost as if he's correcting himself. Don't think that this image of the yeshiva that I've talked about is so it's only for 300 people or whatever it is, 200 or the 3,000 people in Mir, or whatever the case might be. No. No. And don't let your own hang-ups and your own feelings of inadequacy get in the way. So that's one excuse, or one understanding of what happens when you say al tomar she'adam lichshe panei yishne, when I have time, or when I'm ready, when I'm spiritually worthy. Not long afterwards, very far from where from Belarus, where Volozhin is. In Germany there sat one of the really premier commentators on the Mishnah, whose name was Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz, and he wrote a commentary called Tiferet Yisrael. Tiferet Yisrael is a really fascinating commentary. It has a lot of contemporary comments on it. It reflects it really stands as a very strong reflection of the intellectual ambiance of his life, and the kinds of tensions and the kinds of conflicts and the kinds of issues that were raised for Jews who were trying to remain traditional in 19th century Germany, which was the center of culture, the center of academic excellence, and where Jews were assimilating like crazy, and where the question is, is it possible to balance a religious life with the challenges and the seductions and the attractions of 19th century European culture, which everybody saw as everybody in the West, certainly America and Canada held this way, as the height of human achievement. And he has an interesting take. I would think, again, I need time and whatever. He was facing apparently other kinds of issues. Jews in his time were, especially religious Jews, were business people. And already then, business culture was very, very all-consuming. It wasn't as bad as it is today, where people work 24/7. So the contemporary workplace is a form of very, very serious servitude and slavery. And even Orthodox Jews work 24/6. There are all kinds of demands on the time of the individual, which is not the case in the Middle Ages. Certainly not in ancient times, when time was much more. You had more time on your hands, and there were less things to do, and so things went at a different pace. But already, what we recognize as a modern pace is already evident in 19th century Germany. So he says. So what's the excuse that he sees? How does he join? How does he address it? So he says, apparently people had said he would say people study, learn Torah, and he said, I have no time. And what good would it be? What good would it be if I were to study for 15 minutes? What good is studying for half an hour? What quality time would that be? I'm going to have to go to my next meeting anyways. What am I going to remember? And he says, don't make fun of the 15 minutes that you find right here and the 15 minutes you find right there. Because at the end of the day, all of life is the combination of little segments made up of 15 minutes. So 15 minutes over here, and 15 minutes over there, and 10 minutes over there, and a half hour over there, all of that merges. What lies behind the hesitance of the person whose argument he's presenting? So first of all, there's this argument: if Reb Chaim Volozhiner was responding to the sense of people not being worthy of studying, Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz, the Tiferet Israel, is saying, is Torah study, which is not 100% or maximally qualitative, is it valuable? Is it valuable? Person who does Daf Yomi, person who studies a page of Talmud a day, or a half a page of Talmud a day, or studies 2 Mishnayot a day. Okay? Is that really... I know that there are scholars that are sitting in Batei Midrash. There are Batei Midrash for men and women that are studying all day long, and they reach heights of understanding and insight and intellection and spiritual experience that are way beyond anything I could ever possibly do. I'm just too busy. So why bother? And it's interesting, by the way, where this comes up. I had a very dear friend, really a Yedid Nefesh. It was my chavrusa for many years at YU. His name, he passed away a number of years ago, unfortunately. His name was Rabbi Yosei Sefi Rabinowitz, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He really was a tzaddik. And he came into Beis Medrash one day, and he told me, he had just over Shabbat. This was on Sunday afternoon. We were learning in the kollel. And he said he had just had a discussion over Shabbat with, we said Shabbos at the time. We just had a discussion over Shabbos about what is with a guy from Mir. With a guy from the Mir Yeshiva, one of the Ramim, one of the Rosh Yeshiva there. And this Ram was willing to confide to Sefi, or to actually admit to him, to confess to him, that he finds that while he thinks that the level of Torah study that goes on in the so-called black hat yeshivas is higher than that, or greater than that, of a place like Yeshiva University, where you where you go to college at the same time as well. He says, in the long term, graduates of places like YU have an advantage. Why is the advantage? Because those who study in the traditional yeshivot, they only know how to study in a world of total immersion. So those who leave the Beit Midrash, and most people do eventually, they have to get married, they have to get jobs. Certainly in the United States that's the case. Don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the skills to divide their time equitably, because they think, what good is Torah study now, because I can't have the experience I had then, which was on such a high level. Whereas the graduate of the multi-programmed, the person who's in more than one program knows how to concentrate on his Torah when he studies his Torah, to try to reach the highest level he can at the time, knowing he has to push himself forward, and knowing that it's built in that he's going to have to overcome the exigencies of time and other demands and still find time for his learning. That's basically what Lifshitz was saying. He's saying, look it, yeah, if you had optimal situations, but that doesn't absolve, but optimal circumstances don't absolve you from studying. Every bit of Torah study you do is valuable. First of all, it puts you in a modus vivendi, in a way of looking at the world, which is predicated on Torah study. If you're studying every 15 minutes or whatever it is, over here, over there, it's always with you. You're not compartmentalized. So that's number one. Number two, the fact that you know that you can get higher or can do better is actually an advantage, because you will push yourself further. And knowledge is cumulative. So 10 over here and 20 over there and a half hour over here, I mean, all of it comes together. And the truth of the matter is, nowadays we have all kinds of wonderful tools that they didn't have then, that are organized so that you have a certain amount of Torah study every day. There are Mishnah Yomit and Daf Yomi, and this thing called I forgot already. It's this little blue book. I don't remember what it's called now. Which is set up, which is organized so that a person can always have something there to learn and to take advantage of that. I remember the first time I ever met Justice. I'm having a senior moment. Yaakov Rubinstein. Justice Rubinstein walks around with a pocket-sized Mishnayos Kahati in his pocket, in his shirt pocket. So whenever he has a minute, he learns. You don't even need that anymore, because now there's Kahati on your phone. So you don't have to. So people don't have to think that you're playing Candy Crush when you're on the phone. You can be learning. You can take advantage of every 5 minutes you have to learn Mishnayot. Or Rabbi Meni Steinsaltz tells me that the Steinsaltz Center has an app which is now in beta form. I'm not getting paid for any of this, by the way. I'm just giving you advice. In beta form, which is geared to help you study every single day, a certain amount, and have it always there. Because it's not a question of the quantity leads to quality. Language is cumulative. Knowledge rather is cumulative. It all comes together. It all works. It all is transformative. If Torah study follows you through the day, then you become a different persona. Become a different person. In fact, there is a legend that someone once came up to the Chatam Sofer, Rav Moshe Schreiber, and said to him, "How long does it take to become a great Torah scholar?" He said, 5 minutes. Really, 5 minutes? Yeah. If you study every 5 minutes that you have available, then you will become a great Torah scholar. Al yomar kishe paneh tishne. I don't need the optimal circumstances. Shema lo tipaneh. Look at every single free moment that you have that you could study to do so. And finally, there is a misconception that that in order to be able to do one thing, you have to take away something else. And that's not true. What do I mean? Al tamar l'chshe'eh paneh eshneh. Don't think, this is another possibility which I'm suggesting to you. Don't think that you have to discard everything else you know in order to learn. If there are things that you know or that occupy your gray matter which are not appropriate, so Torah study will help you divest yourself of that. But everything else, you don't need. The great thing about learning is, again, it's cumulative. Learning Torah adds dimensions to everything you already know. Al tamar l'chshe'eh paneh eshneh. When I'm able to, divest myself of all my distractions and get rid of everything else I know and just concentrate on learning, that's what I'm studying. Shema lo tipaneh. You might not be able to. You might not be desirable. Because bringing to bear the entire canon of the finest of civilization is also enhancing of Torah study. Okay, well, we've reached. Believe it or not, there's a whole bunch of other possibilities as to the introduction, the meaning of this Mishnah, but we have reached our half hour, and we will see you next week, and we will go on to another one of these Mishnayot, also attributed to Hillel the Elder from the late first millennium BCE and the early first millennium CE, where we're going to have to go not paragraph, but the phrase by phrase, because every single one of them has just endless implications. In the meantime, sign up for the TAIS, Tel Aviv International Synagogue site, and take advantage of all the other things that we offer. And this will be posted, this year will be posted, as always, on my personal Facebook page, on the TAIS webpage, on my Facebook, Rabbi Professor Jeffrey Wolf, and on my YouTube channel, and I'll put it up on YU Torah. And please share it. Please share it, and I welcome all your comments. And there have been more of them, and I really appreciate that. And if you have criticisms, I want them too. First of all, because by your comments and criticisms, I grow and I learn more, and that's the best way to learn. And also because let's make this into a conversation. So we'll see you next time. Bye.